Welcome to this meeting of the Commercial Assets Subcommittee. Please note the start of the meeting has been live broadcast to YouTube for the public to see and hear the proceedings, so please turn your microphone on when speaking. May I ask everyone to turn off any mobile phones or switch them to silent mode. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, please follow the council officers out of the building and do not use the lift. Can I remind members when necessary to complete the gifts and hospitality book located in the signing sheet. You may see from time to time that I'm speaking to officers on the dais who will be guiding me through any procedural points. As the Chair, I'm trusted to maintain decorum of this meeting. I would therefore like to remind councillors that respect is to be shown to all members and officers in the chamber when someone is speaking. I would ask that other members listen and do not hold their own private conversations. Any members who do not respect this will be reminded. May I also remind members that under Part 4 of the Council Code of Conduct, members should not be disclosing any information discussed in the confidential section of this meeting. Turning to the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions. I've received apologies from Councillors Chandler and Seliagopoulos. Councillor Hawkins is attending as a substitute. There can't possibly be any other apologies. Amidst this meeting, held on the 13th of July 2026, can be found on pages 5 to 8 of the main agenda. Do the members agree the minutes as a correct record? Is that agreed? Agreed. Disclosure of interest. Does any member have a disclosure of interest to make in relation to any item on the agenda, aside from the standing declaration from Mark Bunny in relation to his employment by Knight Frank Investment Management LLP and Councillor Williams' standing declaration of his employment in the Elmsley Centre? I see none. Item 4, questions from members of the public. There are no questions from members of the public. Item 5, Commercial Assets Subcommittee Forward Plan. I would like to move this item to the end of the meeting in order that we can discuss some of the points raised in relation to how we handle commercial asset sales as a procedurally, and to discuss the points raised in Councillor Williams' email of dated the 8th. This item does not require all of the officers to be present for the whole time, and so I'd like to move it to the end of the meeting. Does anyone object to moving this item to the end of the meeting and discussing the forward plan and activities of CASC? Thank you very much. In which case we will move to item 6. Investment asset business plans. This item is for the subcommittee to consider and comment on the business plans for 2026-27 for the investment portfolio. May I ask Sian Bowen to introduce this item? This is a Part 1 item, so don't forget.
Thank you, Chair. The business plans are prepared annually and are looked at over a 6-year period. We produce these business plans probably about this time last year. The first drafts went out. They were finally published or have been published and reviewed by Finance over the last 6 months. And they predicate all the finance information, budgeting that goes into both Spelthorne and West Surrey moving forward. Clearly, a number of the assets are being marketed at the moment, but from an asset management perspective, it is business as usual, and therefore business plans are very much still required. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions that can relate to this within Part 1? I will ask first. I do have a couple of questions, which I believe can be answered in Part 1. The first one is, can you confirm that the numbers in these business plans are the numbers that will then be moved into any sales documents that we see? I.e., think like the rent is the rent that we'll see,
the contracted rent receivable is confirmed as in the sales particulars. A purchaser will take a view very much on any empty space and what incentives may be provided. We've clearly taken a view on what we think the market is appropriate in the marketplace and in our cash flows, but a purchaser may look at it in a different way.
But the paper, any report put forward to members, any numbers in those reports will correspond to the business plans.
Confirmed, yes.
Okay, thank you. 'Cause I think it's quite important that there's only a single story. A second question, which is really for Terry, I think. Could you explain the significance of the capital finance requirement in these business plans for each, not for each building, but in general? What does it mean in terms of what the number actually is?
Yes, so the capital financing requirement is driven by the balance sheet, and it reflects the underlying unfinanced capital expenditure. So it's the net after taking off any capital receipts, grants, and then there's the cumulative impact of MRP being set aside on an annual basis. And it is a clear measure in terms of the financial sustainability, because it does give an indication, as I say, of the balance, as it were, in terms of unfinanced capital expenditure, which ultimately does need to be financed. So it is a key measure. It is an issue which there's been a significant amount of work on, and we did. And it was flagged in the 24-25 audit findings report that there was a difference, and because, as I say, it is a balance sheet driven figure, and there has been an exercise to go back over a number, well, back to 2016-17, which is when we first started to have certainly any external borrowing, to reconcile the overall capital financing requirement to the movement in the balance sheet over that date. There is still some more work to be done, because whilst an overall adjustment has been made, there are one or two discrepancies. So the finance team are currently finishing off an exercise to compare on an individual asset and also all the other expenditure in the balance sheet to ensure that there's a fully reconciled on an individual asset and capital budget basis, because whilst the overall figure is correct, we are aware there are one or two discrepancies. So that work has been, we are expecting to complete this week, so that can be fed into both the auditors and also for the new finance commissioner, Barry Scar, as well. And so that's where we're at the moment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. The reason I asked the question is, if we go to the Treasury Management Strategy from February 2026, it says £905 million of loans were therefore restructured in November 2025, reducing the value of debt in the balance sheet by £342 million down to £715 million. That's correct?
Yes.
Why is it that the sum of the CFRs is greater than that number? The CFRs added up if you add up all the business plans.
Yes, because the CFR is not the same as external debt, and actually this will be made clear in the coming Treasury Management Outturn report, which will be coming to the September CPRC, and effectively it will show that the actual external debt is significantly below below the capital financing requirements. So that it can happen that you end up with that alignment, because the refinancing as such doesn't create a credit on the capital financing requirements, but it is nevertheless a significant positive in terms of it did reduce the external debt by the 342 million which you've just referenced.
Doesn't that mean that when the number is put forward to members, that the value of the loss attributable or otherwise on an individual property when sold is overstated?
No, because the MRP is driven by the capital financing requirement, and that is one of the key components, as you're aware, in terms of why the individual assets were showing a net loss, as indeed summary, which obviously we won't comment on the figures, but so it is the CFR which is driving those figures, not the. Sorry, obviously there is also an impact in terms of the overall level of interest. So there's two elements. There's the MRP and there's the external debt. So they both feed into the equation.
Okay, you can understand my concern about this. If you say that we bought it for £100 and we sell it for 50, but I've rescheduled the debt so that I only owe 70. If I say I've lost £50, that's not true. I'm sorry, I may be being a bit obscure to myself here, but it does strike me that there is a danger that we're overstating the actual financial loss on an individual property basis.
I think I understand where you're coming from. As I say, I think the coming Treasury Management outcome may help a little bit in terms of explaining that, and that's something we can certainly look at in terms of how we explain those different impacts. But I'm not sure we're going to resolve it in this meeting.
I'm sure we won't. Can I just ask one further question? Where a property is sold for less than its current CFR, what happens to the residual CFR since other CFR is allocated to properties?
Yes, so effectively this relates. So yes, so if a property is sold for less than its CFR, then that means there will still be an ongoing CFR in terms of the balance, and therefore that would mean there will still be an MRP until that had been written off over a number of years. So that does creates an overhang. We have the benefit as a council, and West Surrey have the benefit until 2035 of the credit from the refinancing, which will help offset that. But there is potentially an overhang, which has been flagged, and it's been flagged in Treasury Management reports before. So you're highlighting that particular issue. So that is one of the things we need to be mindful of.
Sorry, I don't wish to drag this out, but at the moment CFR has effectively been allocated to individual properties. If that property is then sold, what happens to the overhang? Is there an account or a description for it, or because it can no longer be associated with something that doesn't exist?
Yes, there'll be an adjustment to keep track of the as it were, the uncleared element. So there would be an accounting adjustment to reflect that.
So, thank you. Does anyone have any questions that they can ask in part one? Councillor Howkins.
I can ask it without turning around and revealing anything, if you know what I mean. Your asset business plan, is there any chance that we can have, before the next meeting, one that's up to date? I mean, we're looking at information here, March 26 and December 25. And that on page 25, 26, there's been a lot of changes on the tenants since then. And, you know, when you sort of read some of the things, you're like, that's, you know, goes to page 26, the 1/6 from the bottom, the notation of low to moderate. Is that really appropriate?
I wonder while Coral is looking at that, if you might, Sean, you might have a comment on the timing of the business plans. Oh, Coralie.
All I was going to say was these business plans run from the 1st of April each year to the 31st of March of the following year, obviously in tying with the financial year. So we could look at potentially updating some of those, and I say potentially because I need to understand the level of work. I need to have a conversation with the team outside the meeting from perhaps a half-year point of view. But if we change the information now, it won't relate back to the beginning of the financial year. So I think from an accuracy point of view, we do need to maintain that 1st of April position.
The Dun and Bradstreets are updated every 6 months, and we have actually just updated them. So I'm happy to share with you the most up-to-date Dun and Bradstreets for all the tenants. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions anyone would like to ask as a part 2 question? No? That being the case, does the committee note the business plans for 26-27 for the investment portfolio? Is that agreed? I think there was a number of agreements there. Thank you. The next item is item 8, commercial portfolio update. Coralie, you are not proposing to do this anything other than as a part 2, are you?
Sorry, no, the content of the update is commercial, so it needs to be part 2. But if there is any specific questions that members have that we can cover off in part 1, then I'm happy with the Chair's agreement to try and respond to those more generic points.
Well, I will read out the text for this item. This item is to receive an update on the properties within the commercial portfolio. Papers to accompany this update can be found in the supplementary addenda. The assets team will present this update. Are members, I'll ask this without going through the wording, are members prepared to go into part 2 so that we can have a proper update on this matter? Sorry, could I see some indications from councillors? Councillor Howkins?
I'm thinking about it.
Councillor Williams? I'm going to abstain. Okay, in that case, I'm going to read out the wording. Item 7, exclusion of press and public exempt business. We will now need to move to part 2 to deal with exempt business. As we will be discussing private information, we will need to formally agree that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information under the relevant paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Beattie. I'm prepared to second that. Is that agreed? Would you like the vote to be recorded? Okay. Do we need to go through the recorded vote process?
I'll just...
Can't we just individually note someone's vote?
Yeah. If those in favour? Those against? And abstentions?
And you're happy that that is named in the minutes? Okay. Thank you. Coralie, your mic's on, by the way.
Thank
Okay, so the question here is, what is the future process for considering or taking forward the sale of properties generically? And there is clearly a concern that Councillor Williams has expressed most eloquently that this committee or subcommittee is not being given the opportunity to consider sales. We understand that constitutionally it doesn't have a right to perform that, but from a member's point of view, there is nowhere else to have a properly considered discussion. I think, or Howard, would you like to put your position forward, or rather speak on this?
No, it's all in my email. I mean, to be blunt, my email wasn't to prompt a discussion and debate about this. It was simply to set out my point of view. And my point of view is that if the council continues to circumvent this committee and do things that are not commensurate with what we've told the public and do things in secret, then I will continue to oppose them when they go to CPRC and to council on that basis. So I don't think we need to have a great debate about it. That's just my position.
Were you happy with the process around the public information on Thames Tower?
I was fine with the public report. Yes, I think the more we can, and we've shown that we can do Part 1 reports on disposals. We did so with Ashford Victory Place, we did so with Thames Tower. We had a very good debate over, very lively debate over Ashford Victory Place, some in Part 1, some in Part 2. I appreciate it was very difficult for officers to put that together. But we have a duty to our residents to tell them what's going on. And you can't just turn around and bounce something into CPRC, then council say, by the way, this is our best chance of getting a significant income this year, but we're not going to tell anybody about it. And we're not going to give councillors an opportunity within this expert committee to debate it before it goes to CPRC. I mean, why on earth do we have Mark on this committee if we don't give him an opportunity to say what he thinks about these disposals?
Coralie, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously the 3 disposal reports that we've taken forward already, they were initially drafted as Part 2, so we then did the Part 1 reports retrospectively. Where I'm drafting the Elmbrook report, that is going to be more in line with the Ashford Victory Place reports that we've taken forward in terms of its style and content, so hopefully that alleviates that concern.
The other concern was that nothing is coming to this committee, went straight to CPLC. Is there any opportunity for that to be different, as Howard has pointed out? So to get Mark's opinion, it needs to come here, and I think we as members think that's the purpose of this subcommittee.
I think, as you know, informally we have been seeking Mark's opinion on some of these informally, but it's not within my gift to determine. Linda's already explained the rationale for taking the reports directly to CPRC rather than coming to this committee, and I'm afraid I can't add anything to that.
We've heard the constitutional argument, but I think you'll accept, Linda, that there is a, it's not moral, but there is an argument that says this committee subcommittee should be given a chance to discuss these. Is there any objection on your part that happens?
Thank you, Councillor, because I hear what you say, but it would fly in the face of the constitution and the remit of the committee and then the purpose of the committee, because looking up at the papers, and thank you for your email, Councillor Williams, just a response to that this committee hasn't been set up as a committee of experts. It has been rebranded in the course of review of the committee system and how it worked in 2024, and that was on the back of LGA. Let me just get that straight. That was on the back of recommendations in the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge, and also, that was in 2022, and also findings of the internal audit review, also in 2022, which found that the system was set up then, and the committees were set up there, wasn't efficient, and there was duplication, and there was crossover, and that was not in the spirit of best practice and transparent and effective decision making. So this committee has been set up with a specific remit, and again, for fear of repeating myself, the remit is limited to operational management of the portfolio, of the council's commercial property portfolio. When it was set up, that was the purpose, again, was for agile and quick decision making to enable operational decisions to be made and operational transactions to be entered into, because it was accepted that CPRC is not meeting sufficiently frequently to enable that responsiveness in commercial transactions. So that is the remit and the purpose of the committee. And what we are faced with at this moment in time is something entirely divorced from the original reason for this committee, and that is a corporate project of divesting of the commercial assets. So therefore, it is firmly outside the remit and the area the area for this particular subcommittee, and therefore, rightly so, goes to CPRC. And I absolutely hear what councillors are saying, but the good governance have got to prevail. After all, it's something that has been picked up in particular by the best value inspection, and personally, frankly, I cannot see how we can undo that, because again, a comment I made, and I stand by it, that the constitution has been approved by all councillors in the chamber. Then clearly, obviously, there was an agreement to set up this particular committee for a specific reason, purpose, and now going back on it is somewhat baffling. Thank you.
I'm afraid we can go round and round in circles on this, because it's very clear the terms of reference say that we deal with disposals. Disposals 2A to receive recommendations from officers as to the potential freehold disposal of investment assets. Following that, to give an initial steer on whether to investigate further those potential disposals. I mean, it's very, very clear. You can't just say, well, actually, I'm sorry, this is now above your pay grade. We're not, I don't think we're ever going to agree on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Williamson. I hear what you say. However, yes, it does say disposals, but those are meant to be singular individual disposals of individual property. When in the course of managing portfolio, it's not unreasonable that property will be sold. And in fact, before the this corporate, before the project was approved by council, I believe there was December, individual disposals before the programme was approved as such. The reports did go, for example, Summit Centre, when we received off-market individual offer as a one-off, that did go. Likewise, Corridor Roundwood, likewise. So therefore, there's a distinction to be made. Individual disposals, and absolutely rightly so, you pointed out, yes, it is within the remit. However, what we're talking about now is beyond individual disposal. It is divesting of a portfolio which is on a completely different plane than portfolio management, and that is a distinction, and that's why this is outside the remit of this particular committee. Each committee has its own remit, and it's not a question of pay grade or some such. It's so that there is no duplication of work, there is efficiency in decision making, and there is efficiency of working of the council. Thank you.
I think we understand both your positions quite clearly. Is there anything to stop this committee discussing asset sales before they happen and before they go to CPRC without having to formally take any view on them? I mean, the point here is there is an absence of discussion before it gets to CPRC which has very full agendas and doesn't get the chance to have a full discussion. If the paper is written, what is the problem in bringing it to this committee before CPRC? I'll let Coralie first, if you don't mind.
I mean, I'm sure Linda wants to come back on this, but I think to a certain extent we are doing that. You know, we've discussed Elmbrook today. I've given you an update on the headlines and some of the key terminology. So whilst you don't have a paper in front of you, we are presenting the information as it's coming forward as part of that commercial property update. So it's not that we're trying to hide anything or not be transparent. It's just that we're presenting it in a different form than a formal committee report. But as I say, Linda may have a view.
If I may, through you, Chair, you exactly, Coralie, you took words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say, because this committee does receive updates when it decides to go in part two, to get all the pertinent information and to be in the know. And then obviously at that point, there is nothing stopping the committee from viewing or from what's the word I'm looking for? Elucidating and voicing their opinions. And all the information is provided. But again, going back to the remit and the efficiency, whilst I hear what you say, Councillor Nichols, and in principle, when the report is drafted, nothing would have stopped for that report to be shared with particular members. But that to what end? Because there is no decision to be made. There is, if it's just for information, only for a debate. Equally, I do believe that everyone on this committee is also part of CPRC, with the exception of yourself, I believe. I stand corrected. I do believe you are. As Coralie said, our opinion is being sought. So, again, it's in the name of, for the purposes of good governance, and this council wanted a committee system for a reason. We have a committee system. There's each committee has a role to play. When circumstances change, now it would appear to be the case that there is this desire to step aside and then put together an alternative proposal, alternative working arrangement in place, which I do not believe is good governance. Thank you.
Why don't we turn round and have an amendment for terms of reference to go to the next full council? The reason I'm saying that is we know that CPRC is always a very, very full thing, sometimes 19, 20 different items, and it generally goes on past the clock. I think that to turn round and take to council, maybe CPRC before, a thing saying an amendment to the terms of reference to ensure that they will all property disposals will come to this committee and be discussed in full, and do it, amend the terms of reference so that there's no misunderstanding and there's nobody feeling as though they're being duplicitously, things are going on that we don't know about.
Through you, Chair. Noted. I hear what you say again. And do you propose that CPRC, the disposals are not discussed at CPRC at all? They go to this committee and then straight to council? Is that what you're suggesting? Because otherwise it makes absolutely zero sense. Because if there's no enough time for CPRC to be discussing these reports in full as it is at their regular meetings, and bearing in mind that the number of councillors is far greater and is one of the biggest committees that we have, and then one of the more important after the council, then you're suggesting that the group of 5 councillors can fully discuss and arrive to a conclusion which would be somehow superior to that of the parent committee. First. Secondly, in principle, yes, absolutely, terms of reference can be changed. The progress of the governance route is the committee system working group to discuss, standards committee to recommend to council, and then council to approve changes to the constitution. However, we're going back to the duplication of labour, and there's going to be the same items going to be discussed 3 times in 3 different committees. Thank you.
I did not suggest that we turn around and went from CAS straight to full council. What I suggested was that we turn around and have the terms of reference adjusted so that it will come here and then it will go on to CPRC, having turned around and reassured those on CPRC that yes, it's had the time to have a full discussion at CAS, as opposed to ignoring it and having what happened on Thursday happen again. Where they turned around and Thames Tower went straight to full council, went straight to CPRC and then full council.
This is a question as opposed to a statement, and maybe I'm misunderstanding here, but there's two things that kind of come to mind is we've said all along that we actually took a decision as a council back in December time to sell the assets. So the decisions that we're bringing forward now are not about, and this is, I think, you know, if we were making decisions about whether we sell the assets, and I could see the benefit of bringing them to CASC, but the decision was taken to sell the portfolio of assets, as Linda says, for debt reduction, so finance-orientated purposes rather than property transactional purposes. So what we're actually asking for in the reports is not approval to sell the asset as such, but whether the terms are acceptable, I suppose. And we can do that here without a report. And as I say, Linda, I'm going to be a little bit, perhaps not quite as delicate with my wording as Linda is, but we have 3 committees we have to take the reports through to if we bring it to CASC. Those reports on office, those committees on officers are hard. We get a hard time. We come out of that absolute drained. Maybe councillors feel the same as well, but I'm talking about this from an officer perception point of view. I don't relish the thought of having to go to a 3rd committee when the decision has already been made. It's just the terms that we're discussing in terms of having to do this more formally in terms of additional work, because it is a 3rd report that has to be written, or 6 reports if you're talking part 1 and part 2, 2 additional reports. Really happy to discuss it here and debate it here and get feedback here, but actually we're under quite a lot of pressure in terms of the workload that we've got on and the things that we've got to do in a really short period of time. Now, that may seem irrelevant to councillors, and I understand if that's the case, but that is the reality of me as the report author and those others obviously that go to committee in terms of having to take these forward.
It was agreed to sell the properties in December by orders of the commissioners. It was not agreed to give them away. And at the moment, we are turning around and fire selling and giving away. I think that while we're turning around and doing this, we need to turn around and take a different look at things, and that maybe you do need to turn around and come to 3 committees or 4 committees or 10 committees if that's what's required. I think that everybody needs to turn around and be aware of what is going on and stop the secrecy. And as I say, I cannot get my head around the fact that, you know, it was good value to go and get rid of virtually these 50 million on a building, and you'll say, oh no, it wasn't lost, don't ignore the figures that you bought it for. But to turn around and that happened, that was wrong. And it was so turned round, and it was completely wrong on Thursday. It was on CPR corporate policy, and then on Thursday night. And then the commissioners overrid us and said, you're selling it, you're giving it away. So I think that by turning round and having more steps of the ladder, it turns around and says, it went to this one, they disapproved, it went to that one, disapproved. Maybe they'll turn around and start listening and say, actually, you know, are we right to keep giving these away?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. You've made your opinion very clear. Terry would like to respond.
Yes, thank you. And obviously we're all mindful that we're in part 1 at the moment, and we have to be careful in terms of impressions being given. So we have been going through a process where we're informed by the professional advice of our advisors who have given us a range. Some of those are coming out in terms of the offer at the top end of that range, some not so, and it's still over in terms of the overall portfolio. So I personally don't agree that we're giving them away. I think that gives a misleading impression to the general public, and obviously there is a thorough amount of information in the reports, which again we can't go into in this part one discussion. And the point is already made that the decision to make the disposals and the way to do it in terms of procuring a professional advisor, that was agreed as part of the decision in December as well. Thank you.
Howard.
Yeah, just picking up on a couple of points, being careful not to stray into part two here, but the purpose of this committee, as I see it, is to inform CPRC and Council. This is the place where we have the difficult debates about these assets. We touched earlier on about the master plan and how this impacts on the master plan. That is not going to come up at CPRC and Council unless you want to be there all night. Our role is to ensure that where we have said that we're going to go for strategic disposal of assets, that it's just that. It's strategic. It's not just a fire sale. And what we've seen today, again, without going into details, we've been surprised today to find that actually some of the assets were going to be phase 2 are now being brought forward. That is a departure from what the full council agreed. We should be having these debates in this committee, so when they go to CPRC, they know that we've discussed every possible ins and outs of these, that they fit the strategy and that we support it. And if we don't, at the end of the day, CPRC can say, thanks very much, Cass, but we're going to do it anyway.
Linda, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just check, are you councillors suggesting that debate at CPRC and council is somehow inferior to debate in here? It is within the gift of council, of those councillors at the committee, to actually have an informed debate and then raise issues and the pertinent points and debate them thoroughly. Not quickly, but thoroughly. Again, it's within the gift of each and every councillor. And secondly, in terms of Councillor Hawkins, don't massively appreciate references to secret meetings and secret decisions. Could you please elucidate? Because as far as I'm aware, no secret decision has been taken. And if you could provide examples, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so when was it decided to go straight to CPRC for Thames Tower instead of coming here first? When was that actually announced? Because I think it came out after much questioning at council when it already been through CPRC. I don't recall anyone in any other council meeting saying that that was fine.
If I could just respond. Well, that first of all, this is a debate and a discussion that's been taking place as and when once the programme of disposal has been agreed in principle. The governance route was discussed at that point, and at that juncture, I have considered the terms of reference and the constitution, and a decision was made by myself as monitoring officer, as I am entitled to in accordance with the constitution, which again, I keep repeating myself, this chamber has approved. And secondly, is an officer action as opposed to decision, and therefore there's no need for that particular officer action to be, well, this is just it. The clue's in the name, it's officer action. And equally, I am somewhat surprised that when, Business Centre and Summit Centre were being discussed and at CPRC and Council, they didn't seem to have raised a query why they haven't come to CASC, and somehow it's all about Thames Tower. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
There's kind of a bit of difference in the value of Summit House and Thames Tower. You're talking of losing 50 million, you know, and turning round. And the thing with corporate policy, the agenda's a chock-a-block. What we are saying is there is not the time in corporate policy to turn around and give the disposal of assets the time that it needs. That there is a lot of councillors, I think it's probably about 50% of the councillors on it, And so if everyone wants to say anything, we do go into extra time.
Which
We do
actually,
think, yeah.
which actually ensures a full and rounded and thorough debate.
So
And
if we've
Stanley-
turned around and done the first step of the ladder and come here, then we can turn around and say, it went to CACAS, and like with the Elmsley Centre, it raised the fact of the Staines master plan. You can turn around and put that information in CPRC.
Nothing is stopping you from doing just that.
Councillor Beattie, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to my mind, we are at an impasse and what we need to do is find a common ground to address the sanctity of the Constitution, and I fully appreciate that. You know, I've sat where you've sat in a slightly different context, upholding a Constitution. So within the Constitution, we have to find a way forward. One of the things that you said, Linda, was every sale is individual. So I'm wondering if we can find a way to interpret the Constitution in such a way that individual sales come to this forum. One of the things that I've learned over time is you have the formal constitution and best practice evolves out of that formal constitution. And I think we should find a way that we can respect the constitution whilst addressing the concerns that Karen and Howard have raised around the work that this committee does. It's absolutely true that CASC can scrutinise things in far greater detail than CPRC or full council. Now, that doesn't mean that the councillors here are more qualified. It just means we have more time. Councillor Howkins is right. Average CPRC and council has probably got something like 20 items on it. And, you know, you can't spend a couple of hours like we can every month going through reports. We can do that, and we agree and disagree as the case may be. One of the, and this again is around that, to me, that the core of what this does. I spent years battling with a previous employer around what consultation and negotiation means. We wanted to negotiate, they wanted to consult. Now, speaking very much to the point that Councillor Williams makes, this committee should be consulted on the matters we've discussed today. And we will give an opinion, and Councillor Williams is right. CPRC and Council can then either go with our opinion, totally ignore our opinion, or somewhere in between. I think we can by being constructive, trying to find a way within the Constitution that we can address the points that we've made about this committee, scrutinising in far greater detail the disposals. And, you know, that way nobody, I think, has to feel that their position is compromised, that the Constitution is compromised. It's merely trying to find a way to best address the situation that this council has found itself in through decisions that were made in the past that we are now having to deal with, that quite frankly, none of us, both from a councillor perspective, or I would respectfully suggest an officer perspective, would wish that we had to deal with. But we have to, we are where we are, and I do, you know, with the best will in the world, think that with a little bit of flexibility on all sides, both sides, all sides, we can find a way that can address the sanctity of the Constitution while addressing the aspirations we have on CASC to do our job in the manner that Karen, Howard, myself, and no doubt Denise, if she was here, would articulate. Hopefully that will help. That's the intent in which I've made these comments. You know, it really is to try and find a way forward that we can work to the best advantage.
I'd just like to make a point. I think several councillors have made the point that basically there is a role for members of this committee in briefing or forewarning the members of their own groups, which will, should, one would hope, improve the quality of debate at CPRC by saying this is something which should be focused on. that bit's okay. I'd like to put a scenario to whichever officer would care to take it. What I can see happening here is if we carry on as we are, we will probably not get agreement to take CASC into Part 2, therefore not have any updates at all. The CPRC will probably take the view that they're unhappy because the whole process isn't working, and council will take the same view. So the danger is that we will go through a repeat of the Thames Tower, which doesn't help anyone. Is there a way in which we can get out of this? Like, for example, I presume the heads of terms are agreed before the report is written. Is there any way that we could consider and see the heads of terms so there wasn't the need to have the report? So some way which we could discuss the principal details of the deal against the background of some information, but so that we actually have a chance to form an opinion and brief others. I know certainly from my group's point of view, I'm always asked, what do I think about these things? And so I try and tell them, and I assume that happens with others. So I would, is there a way in which we can move this forward so that we are allowing the council to do its job properly? And, there is a duty to make sure that we are getting best value. And that's something that we and councillors want to do. And I don't think if we follow the process that Thames Howard followed, we're doing anything to make sure that we get best value. I don't know who'd like to take that. Linda.
Thank you, Councillor Lakers. Thank you, Councillor Beattie. Yes, it would be, I think the pragmatic solution and a compromise of some description would be a prudent way forward. In terms of interpreting constitution so that each disposal is a separate transaction, I'm afraid it's going to be tricky, verging on impossible, because we know it's part of the portfolio, and we know it's part of the larger exercise. However, what Councillor Nichols has suggested, I think, does have some legs, and then is workable as a sort of briefing with sort of seeking views with a view to then disseminating that information within respective groups and then pointing out areas to concentrate and particularly debate at CPRC. That'll be one element. The other element is that officers would look to lighten up the agendas for CPRC to enable that space to debate. Alternatively, we'll see what, if anything, can be arranged by way of extraordinary to make sure that there's only those limited items are under discussion again, to allow Chamber the due time that these items demand for an informed debate. Gordon, would you like to? Is it workable on your?
Coralie, please, just your comment, please.
Yeah, I think that's fine. As we sort of said earlier, we've touched on some of the updates as part of the commercial property update, the part 2. I don't think there's any reason why we can't include the heads of terms and we can't do a brief note as part of that commercial update with some of the salient points that will impact thought processes and decision making as we move forward. So, and I think again we can elaborate on how we've approached marketing, how we've approached best value. There, I understand there is a view that we are not achieving best value for these assets. And I think perhaps that's being looked at, that statement is being looked at through a number of different lenses. So we can perhaps address that as well. And the reason I say it's coming through from different lenses, because yes, I understand from a councillor point of view, fully respect from a councillor point of view, that there is concern around the reduction in value from when we bought the asset to what we might be selling it for. But from a pure surveying point of view, with me and the team as your professional advisors, what I've tried to explain is our process in terms of achieving best value in the market conditions that we are disposing of the assets in. So there has been suggestions that that's fire sale and things like that. It isn't, in the sense of looking at it through a property perspective, because we've got the marketing period. So maybe we can focus on some of that as well in terms of the updates to try and allay those fears. And even if we're what we're referring to in terms of best value, we're giving it different titles in terms of how we're all addressing it from that understanding point of view. So we're not talking at cross purposes and things like that. So maybe that's some of the stuff that we can tease out as we're having those discussions. Thank you.
Terry, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Beattie and the Chair for trying to move this forward in terms of a pragmatic way forward, which I think we're all in agreement it would be beneficial. And yes, I think some form of briefing and possibly around heads of terms, etc., would be useful, and that would also enable our independent lay member to have an opportunity to comment as well. And as Corey says, that could facilitate more discussion around the issue in terms of best value and the different lenses which would be looked at. So that could be useful, because we do want councillors to have the opportunity to understand and make informed decisions. So I think there's probably something there for us as officers to go away and reflect on in terms of how we move this forwards.
Councillor Hawkins.
I'd like to propose that we take a vote on turning round and doing a ASAP adjustment to the terms of reference so that they are made to come to this committee, and that this happens before the next sale comes, because turning round and sending us an email, that's not the grounds for a discussion. That's the grounds for an individual. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, Mark Bunny probably maybe only found out about the sale of Thames Tower from this meeting. You know, it's not right. So that's my suggestion, is that we have a vote to turn around and get the terms of reference amended, and that we turn around and insist that all property sales and that come to this committee.
I'm not sure that it's for us to take a vote on that kind of thing. It's for group leaders to take that forward with the appropriate committee. Linda will explain the process.
Thank you, Councillor Nichols. You're absolutely right. It's the Committee of the Existing Working Group, which is comprised of all group leaders. And if there's appetite for that, obviously there's, as I've said already, there's a governance route, which then means that it goes to standards and then goes to council, first of all. Secondly, it's very heartening to know, Councillor Hawkins, that you so readily dismissed proposal of moving forward without actually delving into the details of what is being proposed. Because at no point, we believe, has been said it's going to be an email. It was meant to be a briefing during the committee, which is no different to having a report and then discussing. The only difference being that there isn't a formal decision as such. There isn't anyway, because this committee is entitled to give recommendations only. So I think it would have been helpful in order to find a way forward to perhaps discuss and evaluate what the proposal contains before being dismissed. Secondly, I also would like to make a point that there is a difference between securing best consideration, which is a statutory duty under the Local Government Act 1972, and also best value duty, which is another statutory duty under the obligation under the Local Government Act 1999. They're two different things. Sound the same, but they're different, because first, well, the former is a requirement for the council to secure best financial consideration when council sells land. As Coralie said many times, is that the best way to gauge the value of the asset is to put it into the open market, which we did, and we have got the result. So therefore, we have complied with that particular statutory duty. The best value duty, however, is council's continuous learning and improvement in how their functions are being exercised. Without putting too fine a point, I would just point out that we have been in statutory intervention since almost over a year. And one of the key elements of that particular statutory intervention and the directions given to this council by the Secretary of State is to reduce debt and regularise the commercial portfolio ownership and exposure. So that duty applies to all councillors. It's a statutory requirement to bear in mind when all decisions are made. So I fail to see how officers complying with that duty, and in the course of complying with that duty, bringing in a report, again in compliance with that duty, how that is not meeting the best value obligations that's been bandied around this particular chamber earlier today. So I think it's important to appreciate that it is incumbent on all members in their decision making to be aware that there is a statutory obligation to improve the efficiency of how this council works. And again, repeating myself, bearing in mind that we're in statutory intervention and we know what we are set to achieve, I think it stands to reason that facilitating and furthering those statutory directions would be indeed complying with best value duty. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins?
I'm very much concerned by the reluctance. I feel as though that there's another property coming down the line that you won't want to take to this meeting, and that's why it's about. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but you're very, very reluctant to turn around and listen. And everybody was aware of the uproar at full council on Thursday relating to this. So, yeah, I'm happy to turn around and contact all the group leaders and start the process rolling. But I think that you are turning around and for some reason or other, you really don't want this to happen. Don't know what it is, but that's the impression you're giving.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Linkers. Councillor Hawkins, not massively appreciating personal nature of your comments, first of all. Secondly, yes, there is another property coming because, as Coralie did say earlier in this meeting, that there will be other disposals coming in for September, for October. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. There is something else coming. Secondly, not reluctant, there's a process. If the governance is such and if there's approval and willingness to do whatever it is that needs to be done, by all means, because my role here is to uphold the governance and then the workings of the council, not to express an opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, coming back to the best value point, we as elected representatives of the residents have a duty first and foremost to our residents. That duty is not first and foremost to the commissioners, and the commissioners have let us down, frankly, in the past. We had a buyer for Ashford Victory Place who would have built about 30 affordable homes there. The commissioners intervened, told us they could do better. Here we are 2 years later, we don't have those affordable homes, we don't have the sale proceeds. So we, in my view, it's only my opinion is that we should have a forum for challenging what is just an assumption. There's an assumption that because commissioners say do this, we do it, and that's doing the best thing for our residents. It's not necessarily always the case. And we should have an opportunity in this committee to really fully debate these things. So when it goes to CPRC and it goes to councillors, to council, our residents must know that we have stood up for them.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Can I just reiterate that all councillors have a statutory duty first and foremost?
Can I just make an observation? It seems to me that we have been discussing two things. One is what is constitutional and what's allowed, and the other is whether or not we're having a proper, full, frank exchange of views and a debate on the matter. To my mind, it's the second that matters. I think altering the constitution will take time. You've got to line up at least 4 meetings, is it? Several meetings to then make a change. Whereas actually there is nothing stopping us discussing these matters as an update and having, in effect, exactly as much influence and discussion as before. To my mind, what would be relevant to that discussion would be that we were in possession of facts. We can't say we've got 2 people, one has offered this, one's offered that. That's not a discussion around facts of an offer. I think you'd need to have heads of terms at least clear as to what they're likely to be. I know they may vary, I'm not trying to stitch you up. So I don't think there's constitutionally anything to stop us doing that, and that, to my mind, is the important part. The only problem I personally see with that is it fails transparency. Because it's a draft heads of terms, it couldn't be in part one. It would have to be a part two discussion because it's draft, and that's perfectly reasonable. So I don't know. I think I would ask other councillors whether or not, what observations they would make on that, and whether or not there is an opportunity to go ahead with a fact-based discussion here, which is not actually a report and not actually a recommendation. Councillor Williams, Councillor Howkins, Councillor Beattie. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Sorry.
Go on. No, go on.
No, Sean.
Oh, right, okay. Just from my perspective, what's important to me, and I was trying to articulate a minute ago, is that this forum has an opportunity, and I'll use my industrial relations term because that's my area of expertise, is to consult or be consulted and then give an opinion, which then goes to CPRC and to full council. I believe that's what we do now. I wish that to continue. My point I made earlier on is if we have to find a whether it's informally, I'm not too fussed about the language, but I'm just conscious and, you know, staying within the Constitution, I fully understand that. And it may be a different argument about an amendment to the Constitution or a change to the Constitution if we were at the beginning of a term, but we're not. We're close to the end of a term. And, you know, the logistics, it'd probably be 2 months before that amendment, if it was passed, would take effect. My point is we could achieve what we want through an amendment by best practice, by doing what I've said, finding a way, which I think you've spoke of, finding a way that the CASC forum can take the time that we have on a Monday afternoon every month that maybe CPRC and council don't have, to be consulted, to form an opinion, to give that opinion then to be taken forward to CPRC and then to council. And as Councillor Williams has said, on point 4, or throughout his email, CPRC and council can take a total different view to us if they so desire. But I just think we need to find a way to continue the scrutiny that by and large we have undertaken for a period of time. That's my perspective.
Councillor Williams.
I think Councillor Beattie's pretty much said what I was going to say, which is I'm not really too fussed what the how we describe it. I just want to make sure that we get an opportunity to scrutinise these things and put a view to CPRC so that, frankly, when it gets to CPRC, they know that we've discussed every possible angle, we've got every possible answer, and we don't go through hours and hours of debate there and at council.
Can I make an additional suggestion, which I will welcome officers' view on first, that at the end of any discussion of that nature, we put forward a formal note of the issues that we raised for the public domain. So, for example, to say we were concerned over the freehold nature of the property or something, but nothing which talked about price or value, but just to show that we have actually looked at issues. It's just a thought that because I don't see there's any way of discussing a draft heads of terms in anything but part 2. I just be impractical.
I think that's absolutely right. As much as we can put in part 1 as we can, fantastic, as a summary after we've had a full debate here. We need to remember the reason that this council moved to a committee system was because there was a perception that very important decisions being made by a small group of people with very little scrutiny. Now, that's not actually what happened, but that's the perception of our residents, and we need to counter that as much as making sure that we are delivering best value for them.
Any officer wish to comment on that? Coralie?
I'm listening, I'm hearing. I think I just need to take it away and digest it and talk to other colleagues. The immediate issue that strikes me is we have a report due to go to CPRC on the 8th of September. And that is the Umbrook House report that I updated you on earlier. And I think CASC is the day before that. So that obviously on that one is going to make things quite tight.
Do you have no objection to it being discussed on the day
I have
before?
no objection to it being discussed at CASC at all in terms of the heads of terms, and no concerns. It's just, I suppose, Mike, and this is where I just need to touch base with Linda and other colleagues, is just how we record the view of this committee in relation to getting something through to CPRC, if that's what you want to achieve.
Could I just ask councillors, do we expect to record an opinion as councillors to go to CPRC?
My instinct would be, yes, capture the debate and, you know, we'll either all agree, all oppose, or it could be split. But I think it would help CPRC stroke council by us giving an opinion. And it goes back to my point about consultation and then giving an opinion. I would see little, it's only a personal view, I would see little point in being consulted and then not expressing an opinion on what you've been consulted about. I mean, that opinion could be, I have no opinion, or I have no view one way or the other, or I'm neutral. I suspect, given the nature of the CASC committee, that is unlikely to happen. But I think an opinion, not a direction or a directive, but an opinion. But I say that's just
Not a recommendation.
not a recommendation.
Howard was nodding. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's very helpful for CPRC to receive that opinion, know what we've discussed, so that they don't have to discuss it all again at CPRC. It also gives officers an opportunity to go away and say, okay, so if we nail this point and this point, then all of the objections go away. So then, there's a gap between CASC and CPRC, where an officer can say, this is going to be a real stumbling block, so what can we do about it? Then when it goes to CPRC, they say, this was a real stumbling block, and this is what we're doing about it. It's only positive.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about the discussion we had earlier on about the Elmsley and Thames Staines Master Plan. Now, if that just went straight to CPRC, can you imagine how many, you'd have at least 10 councillors passing comment on that. That's your whole meeting gone. Where, if it come here, we could turn around and send that to CPRC with a thing saying, we have discussed this, we have concerns over it.
Officers, any opinion?
I was just going to say, with all due respect, even if you do discuss that this committee, I cannot see that because you've discussed it here, and if other members of CPRC have got a view, they're going to want to share that view. They're not just going to turn around and say, well, okay, because it was discussed as CASC, we won't air our views in the CPRC meeting. Maybe I'm wrong, but...
No, but it's a good point that forewarned is forearmed, in that the arguments and the key issues will be clearer and easier to be explained. Linda?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Well, just picking up on comments that Councillor Williams just made, that the perception of previous form of governance and sort of widening up to bigger audience, well, we seem to be reversing, because we seem to be suggesting that this audience of arena of 5 councillors is somehow suited to debate, whilst the key strategic committee of the council isn't. I hear the comments about the timings and some such, but hence suggestion to free up the agendas to allow the time that such topics deserve. How the whole purpose of committee system governance is that there's wider participation in important decisions, yet here we are debating. In terms of...
Sorry, Linda, I would just make a point. If you go to Parliament for that particular point, parliamentary committees consider the detail and then they put it back to Parliament. So
Thank you, but we are not in Parliament. However, point taken, point taken. Again, also it's price of democracy. All councillors want to take part in the debate, and yes, they will be expressing their opinion. And then snuffing that particular opinion, I don't think it's democratic. However, in terms of having some sort of exposure to this committee of the terms of heads of terms, for example, for informed debate and an opinion or a view which can then be communicated to CPRC either in the officer introduction or indeed by one of the members of CASC that's at CPRC. Again, nothing stopping any of those members to stand up. And bearing in mind the CPRC, there's no limit on times, number of times one can take part in a debate. That can be communicated to the chamber in some ways. It probably would even land much better when peers actually drawing attention to matters of importance against the agenda item under discussion. I think that would be quite a beneficial active participation in the debate. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'd like to draw this to an end. What I would like to suggest is the course of action, provided there are no material objections, that the next meeting will include the report that's going to CPRC for Elmbrook House. I can't see any reason why that would be objected to.
Yeah, it will be a published report by those timescales anyway.
Yes, okay, and the part 2 will be available to members.
All members have access.
Yes, so that's fine. So we will put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Secondly, I'd like to suggest that with officers, I work up a draft terms for taking forward properties to give effect to the chance for this subcommittee to discuss and offer an opinion. Is that all right?
Like I'm not entirely,
Yeah, you can't agree to something you haven't seen. I can't
quite follow. But in terms of the report being on the agenda, I suggest that we have a briefing as well, like an update or something as opposed to a report itself, because obviously it will be published, so it will be open to the members of this committee to read it up, and rather than this being published on the agenda of this committee. I know I'm splitting hairs here, but I think we just need to be clear what the expectations are.
So the item is an update on the sale.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then based on the already published report, there may be a short summary of some description that one of Coralie's colleagues can bring together to enable the debate.
Paul?
I've tried to remain fairly quiet, members. Let me not distort the collaboration that's taking place. I just want to make one point, though, as we move forward. As officers, we still have to operate under the mandate from the council. That's the senior body. So we have to continue that programme of work. So happy to collaborate in the spirit of sharing information and the pathway you've brought there. But part of, I suppose, the deal is, as members, you understand that that's the policy steer we're working to. That's what I was trying to convey in this room last Thursday evening. And of course, the reason why Corporate Policy Committee has to have a view on that, they are the senior body, and of course their oversight is on finances as well. So series of contributions along the way, but that's where we are as the officer team. Thanks.
I think, Paul, you have to accept that it's a little bit along the lines of a 3-year-old being forced to eat its greens.
Never suggest anything about age in that chamber. Thank you.
Okay. Is those two suggestions acceptable to members? Don't have to get excited, but are they acceptable?
If I may quote Linda, I'll have to see the wording.
Well, the action is the action acceptable to go away and draft some understanding as to a Trump-like memorandum of understanding, however it will be short, as to how we will make sure that there is a debate at this forum for purchase sales going forward. I think we are all okay that we can do that. Okay. I think I'm required to ask, do we formally note the full plan? Okay, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that was long, but I hope we have aired the issue properly and in public.